quiet town, a loving family, and a single night of unimaginable horror. More than a century later, the question remains, who slaughtered 8 people inside 508 East 2nd Street, Villisca, and why does something still linger here? Villisca, Iowa, in the early 1900s, was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors at night. A small but prosperous town with a tight-knit community. In the centre of that community were the Moore family. Josiah, his wife Sarah, and their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. Josiah was a respectful businessman running a successful implement store. The Moores were known for their involvement in church and town events, living what seemed like an idyllic life. But everything changed on the night of June 9th, 1912. That evening, Sarah Moore had arranged for a children's programme at their Presbyterian church. Along with their 4 children, the Moores were joined by 2 young girls, Lena and Ina Stillinger, who were friends of Catherine's. After the event ended, the group walked home together, arriving sometime between 9:45 and 10 p.m. The next morning, the town awoke as normal, except for one house that remained unnervingly silent. By mid-morning, a neighbour, Mary Peckham, noticed that the Moores' home was oddly quiet. No one was outside doing chores, no children were playing. Mary knocked, no answer. Growing concerned, she let herself into the yard and called to Josiah's brother, Ross Moore. He arrived and used his spare key to enter. What he found inside would send shockwaves through Villisca. Inside the modest home, the entire Moore family and 2 guests lay murdered in their beds. Each of them had been brutally attacked with an axe. Josiah and Sarah were found in their rooms, their heads caved in. Their children suffered the same fate. Downstairs in the guest room, Lena and Ina Stillinger were discovered. Lena's position suggested she had awakened before her death, perhaps fighting back. The horror of the scene was almost unspeakable. Blood splattered across walls, ceilings, and even the ceiling lamp, which had been removed and replaced on the floor. A slab of bacon was found near the axe, its presence unexplained. The killer had lingered, covering the victims' faces with cloth and carefully closing curtains. He, or they, had spent time in the home, even making themselves comfortable. The town was in a frenzy. News spread rapidly, and within hours the crime scene was trampled by spectators and amateur investigators alike. The law enforcement at the time lacked modern forensic methods, making the investigation chaotic from the start. But even so, some chilling details emerged. The murder had likely entered while the family was at church, hiding in the attic and waiting for them to fall asleep. The axe used in the killings belonged to Josiah and was left behind. Every victim had been struck in the head, Josiah the most viciously, his injuries so severe that his eyes were removed. The killer, disturbingly, had remained inside the house after the murders, covering mirrors and even making a meal before disappearing into the night. But who would commit such an atrocity? Many theories emerged. One suspect was Reverend George Kelly, a travelling preacher who had attended the same church event as the Moores that night. Kelly was a strange man, known for his obsession with young girls and erratic behaviour. He even left town suspiciously early the next morning. Years later, he would confess to the crime, only later to recant. His confession was inconsistent, and despite putting on trial, he was ultimately acquitted due to a lack of evidence. Then there was Frank Jones, a powerful local businessman and former Iowa senator. Josiah Moore had once worked with him, but left to start his own company, taking business with him. There were rumours that Jones harboured a deep hatred for Josiah, and some suspected he had hired an out-of-town killer, possibly William Mansfield. William Mansfield had a history of brutal axe murders and believed he was responsible for multiple similar crimes across the Midwest, but nothing was ever proven. Another theory suggested a transient serial killer. Around the same time as the Villisca murders, several axe killings occurred in other towns, particularly in Colorado and Kansas. Some criminologists believe a single person, an unknown drifter, could have been responsible for all of them. This theory remains one of the most chilling, as it implies a calculated and methodical killer moving from town to town, slaughtering families in their sleep. Despite these theories, no one was ever convicted. The case went cold, leaving behind more questions than answers, and yet the horror didn't end there. Today, the Villisca Axe Murder House stands as a grim reminder of that fateful night. The home has been preserved and is now open for tours and overnight stays. Many who enter report unexplained activity, Whispers in the dark, shadowy figures, objects moving on their own. Some believe the spirits of the Moore family remain trapped inside, unable to rest. Others suspect something more sinister, an echo of the violence that once took place there. One of the most terrifying incidents occurred in 2014 when a paranormal investigator staying in the house stabbed himself in the chest during a visit. He had no recollection of doing it. Was this the influence of the spirits or something darker? The Villisca axe murders remain one of America's greatest unsolved crimes. A family wiped out in the dead of night, a town left in fear, and a killer who walked away without a trace. More than a century later, the house still stands, its walls holding secrets that may never be revealed. So what do you think? Was the killer someone that knew the family? A hired assassin? Or was this the work of a wandering madman? And most importantly, does something still linger inside the house? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you've ever visited the Villisca Axe Murder House, I'd love to hear your experiences. Don't forget to like, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a Haunted Hunts investigation. And remember, keep searching, keep questioning, and as always, stay haunted.